I'm a psychologist. I'm a clinical psychologist specifically. I started teaching at the university level in 2006, right after I got my PhD. And for the first couple of years that I taught, it was very much kind of I'm just taking what people have done in the past and doing that and just sort of following along in my predecessor's footsteps. And then, about 2 years into my career, I realized something. And what I realized was that I was very tired of grading papers. I don't know if any of you have ever graded a paper before. I'm guessing most of you have. Sometimes it turns out it's not as fun as you might think it would be. And so, I'm tired of grading these papers, but I'm not tired of grading them because I'm lazy. I mean, I'm not lazy at all. And I'm not tired of grading them because they were terrible or horrible to read or anything like that. Some of them were, of course, but not all of them. What I was tired of in terms of grading papers was I was tired of all that effort that was being put into the creation of those and all the effort that was being put in by me to grading those and giving feedback. And then they didn't go anywhere because this is the typical life of a class paper. What you have is you have the students writing your class papers. You have the teacher reading the class papers, and then you have literally no one caring after that. Because these papers then just, get thrown into file drawers, they get put on hard drives, nothing happens with them. So we have these massive amounts of effort just literally going to waste. And so what I was interested in was seeing how could we transform these typical kinds of class assignments into something that was a little bit more useful to the students, useful to the faculty, useful to the world. And so when I was thinking about this, I had a few goals in mind. And one of the big goals that I wanted to sort of, infuse into all of these different kinds of assignments that we're going to talk about is to make them collaborative, to make them dynamic, to make them engaging, and to make them useful. And useful not just to the student in terms of their own learning, but useful to the world in terms of how can we add to the world's store of knowledge via these kinds of assignments. And so I got looking around, I have these giant stacks of papers on my desk, and I think to myself, well, what if we tried to combine all the effort that's being used in these papers, most of them, of course, some of them not a lot of effort, but what if we combine those with something like the flexibility and the worldwide potential of a wiki? And a wiki is, this collaborative editing software, basically, that lives online, that allows you to work with people all over the world. Wikipedia is probably the best example of this. What would happen if we combined something like that was so flexible in terms of how it was able to be used and seen all over the world, and combined with all the effort that these students were putting into their papers? What would happen? What would happen to something like this? So I took my abnormal psychology class, which is an undergraduate upper division course. And what I decided to do was I decided that, hey, we've got students doing a lot of writing. Why don't we just write a textbook? And so that's what we started. We started in the spring of 2009, writing our own textbooks. And this took quite a while. And it took quite a while just because simply you've got undergraduates, they're learning this material, they're not expert matters in there, but through a process that we called Darwinianism, which is all about natural selection over time and gradual changes over time, we ended up with something that was pretty cool. And I'm more than happy to go into the details of this in the Q&A if you'd like. But over the 3 years that this took, the 300 students that worked on this, we ended up with about 800 printed pages. And this is online, and if you have a QR reader, you can snap that there. This is online at abnormalpsych.wikispaces.com. This is now used at 3 different universities, including UCO, as either primary or supplementary text in abnormal psychology courses. One's in Minnesota, one's in New York. And it's had over 300,000 views in the past 3 years alone. And so not only are the students getting something out of this in terms of now they're not paying $150 for a textbook, they're paying free $99. They are also being used and looked at around the world. So people are getting all this really great information around the world. I then took and we used my science versus pseudoscience course that I teach. And what we did here is we did a very similar sort of thing, except we just, because these are graduate students, we did really just a book where each one of them was assigned to write a chapter. And through a pretty similar process in terms of putting things online and working with things online, what we ended up with was basically just a Wikipedia of science versus pseudoscience. This is a page, just sort of give you an example of what this looks like. I mean, it literally looks like an encyclopedia. It looks like Wikipedia. But this was created completely by the students. You know, you can go in there and edit that if you're one of the other students in the class. You can make it better. You can improve it. It's a lot of fun. And this one actually did up really well, too. We just did this over one semester, 20 students, ended up with about 700 printed pages and over 120,000 views in the last 3 years. So people are using this. I mean, people are using this. People are seeing this. They're seeing what's going on. And after these two things, I said, okay, well, what else can we do? You know, where do we go from here? Because, you know, we've already created 2 textbooks. I don't like to do the same thing time after time after time because I get bored. I don't want the students to get bored. So where do we go? Well, what if we shift mediums? Because it turns out there's this website you guys may have heard of called YouTube. YouTube is huge. I mean, literally huge. Every minute, over 100 hours of video are uploaded to YouTube. 100 hours. Over 6 billion videos are viewed a day. 70% of traffic comes from outside of the US, right? So this is not just a US sort of centric thing. And this is actually the #1 search engine for millennials. Millennials tend to go to YouTube before they go to Google to get information about things. And I don't know if you guys know this or not, but a very large percentage of what's on YouTube is absolutely terrible. I mean, aside from the funny cat videos and the you know, children playing songs that they really probably shouldn't be singing, there's a lot of just terrible, terrible information on there. You know, anybody, it turns out, can upload, which is why there are 100 hours uploaded every minute. And so what if we insert ourselves into YouTube as a force trying to spread scientific information? And I started with my science and pseudoscience course. And what we did was we created a series of documentaries called Pseudoscience in Oklahoma. And this course is very much focused on critical thinking and on the scientific method. And so what we did before the class actually started is I created a series of small documentaries, 7 small documentaries, that showed how to make documentaries. Showed how to shoot video, showed how to do storyboarding, showed how to import video, edit video, all that stuff. I also created some class trailers to get people excited about it. I mean, how many of you guys have had a movie trailer for your class that you've taught, right? And I sent this all out to the students ahead of time, and many of them I think were pretty worried, but that's okay, right? That's okay. Being uncomfortable is good. I gave them the following sort of guidelines, and I can, of course, go into more detail if you guys would like at the Q&A. But the guidelines are this needed to be local. Right? So they needed to make documentaries about something that was local to the area. It needed to be doable. You know, they didn't need to have some sort of pie in the sky, like, we're going to blow up a building to see if any ghosts are created or something like that. And it needed to be professional. It needed to look good. It needed to sound good. It needed to be well written. And it needed to look, you know, like someone had really put some time and effort into this. And I gave just the following information. These are all psychology students, mind you. I said, here's how to find how-tos, videos, websites, books. Here's where to get the equipment on campus. Here's where the software is available, and go. I didn't do hand-holding. I didn't spend half my class teaching them how to make documentaries. I said, you're big boys and girls. You can teach yourself. Go. And it turns out they did.
I was in Dr. Lack's science versus pseudoscience course. Well, at first I was a little bit nervous because I'd never made a film before, and I can't say that I would consider myself to be a creative person, and so I was a little apprehensive about that process. But I was also excited because I felt like it was going to be a different type of assignment that I'd never gotten to do before, and I thought it would help me use different skills as well as give a better understanding of the material by actually going out and interacting with it.
I had Dr. Lack's abnormal psychology course. I was actually really excited to learn I was being asked to do a documentary because it was something new. It wasn't just a traditional class paper that I had become kind of tired of at that point. I was a little bit intimidated as well because I hadn't ever had any experience with video making software, but for the most part I was excited.
And so I gave them these things. I said, here, go, here's your guidelines, here's your structure. And they did fantastically. We've done 2 rounds of these, so 2 different classes. In the first one, we had 12 completed documentaries, and they ranged anywhere from 11 to 40 minutes in length. There were 4 that were excellent, 2 that were good, 2 that were okay, and 4 that were just frankly terrible. I placed the top 6 of these online. And this is very much sort of a normative curve, right? And you also have to think, these are psychology students. We're not in film studies, we're not in journalism. They're learning all of this as they go. In round 2, I changed a few things. I teamed up undergraduates with graduate students, so we basically had a production team instead of just a single person doing it. We had 6 that were completed, 2 that were excellent, 3 that were good, 1 that wasn't very good, and I placed those 5 online. Now you might be asking yourself, what sort of things were they looking at? Well, we had a documentary on the Oklahoma octopus, which is this legend of an octopus that supposedly lives down in Lake Thunderbird. I don't know how anything lives in Lake Thunderbird, but it supposedly lives there. Bigfoot, down in southeastern Oklahoma, there's actually a large number of folks who think that Bigfoot's there, and they have hunts every year. They haven't caught him yet because, of course, he doesn't exist, but they still, nonetheless, have those sort of hunts. We had a really fun documentary on a conspiracy theory where John Wilkes Booth, the assassin of President Lincoln, supposedly did not die on the East Coast, but instead died in Enid, Oklahoma. And then we had Catherine, who you saw speaking earlier. Her team did a documentary on the Stone Lion Inn up in Guthrie.
And did you have any kind of an experience?
I did, and I hadn't thought of it when I first came in, but until late that evening, yesterday evening, and every time I went to the bathroom, I would, when you like get a twitch or something, you go like this, but it would happen every time in the same spot. It's like something was rubbing it or...
Rubbing it in the bathroom?
Touching it, yeah.
That's very interesting. Did it
I wouldn't make this up. No.
What did you think it was?
I didn't know.
Was it like a hand or something?
It was more like just a touch. I don't think it felt like an animal or anything, but it just felt like a touch. But it was just like right here.
Like a human touch?
Maybe. I don't know.
Okay, well, thank you.
We had one of our members actually got involuntarily channeled there. Did not ask for that to happen, and it freaked him out bad enough that he has now quit.
Really? So what exactly do you think is happening at the Stone Lion Inn?
Me personally, and I think it was probably the same with the rest of the group, I think that the spirits that are there are upset because Miss Luker, I love her to death, but it seems like she's making a living off of their being miserable.
Not to spoil the documentary, which of course you can see online now. Turns out no ghosts, actually. Surprising. I know, surprising, but turns out not so much. So I took what we had learned in doing this at the graduate level, and I started working with our undergraduates, again in abnormal psychology, for a similar project. And what we did was we came up with a series of videos called Case Studies in Abnormal Psychology. Because I wanted our undergraduates to get in on this, I thought it'd be a good time. I paired them up, and what they did is they took previously written case studies that were actually part of our online textbook. So here we're collaborating across courses again. And they translated them into documentaries, which is a lot of fun. Again, I didn't do any hand-holding. I didn't say, here, let me show you how to do everything. I said, here's the resources, go get it. And what we ended up with across 3 semesters was a total of 51 completed case studies. 35 of those I put online. I mean, that's a pretty good ratio, particularly for these being undergraduates who really, don't have a lot of experience doing this sort of thing. And when I'm talking about case studies, what I'm doing is I'm talking about taking fictional characters like Bart Simpson here and diagnosing him with a particular type of mental disorder. So in his case, ADHD. And then using video clips from The Simpsons to show here's how he meets the criteria for this, so that you have a demonstration, a visual demonstration of here's what this disorder looks like. Our most popular one has been with Regina George from Mean Girls, if any of you guys are familiar with that. Michael Scott from The Office, who we'll see more of here in just a second, with histrionic personality disorder. Jenna Maroney from 30 Rock with narcissistic personality disorder. And then poor little nervous Piglet with generalized anxiety disorder. So what I'm going to show you guys now is actually part of the documentary on Michael Scott.
Today we're going to diagnose Michael Scott with histrionic personality disorder.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Yes. According to the DSM-4, before someone can be diagnosed with histrionic personality disorder, they first have to meet the general criteria for a personality disorder. So, to be diagnosed with histrionic personality disorder, or HPD, someone must meet a minimum of 5 out of 8 HPD-specific criteria. The following video clip portrays how Michael Scott exemplifies general personality disorder criteria such as impulse control, impairment of social functioning, and pervasiveness across situations.
People say I am the best boss. They go, God, we've never worked in a place like this before.
You're obnoxious and rude.
And you get the best out of us.
Mike, get off of the lift, please. Come on now.
The most sacred thing I do is care.
We'll get somebody to clean that up.
I think that pretty much sums it up.
We're the ones that gotta clean that up.
I found it at Spencer Gifts.
A person with histrionic personality disorder doesn't like it when they're not the center of attention all the time. That's Michael. Totally. He hates it when he's not the center of attention.
Hates it.
So that just sort of gives you, a little bit of an idea of what these things are looking like. Now, I'm a numbers guy. I'm a quantitative fellow, and so I like to see what's our impact. This is a graph, and what this graph basically tells you is that in the 23 months since we've put these videos online, there have been over 275,000 views on YouTube. What this results is over almost 13,000 hours of this video. These student-created videos have been watched, and have been watched worldwide. This is actually growing at an exponential rate. So I checked this morning, in the last month we've had almost 40,000 views. So we're getting about 1,300 a day. This is also worldwide, right? So this is not just in the US. It turns out that we've had over 150 countries where people have watched these student videos. The top ones I've highlighted: the US, obviously, Canada, Mexico, but then some surprising ones to me at least. India is huge for us. We're big in India. I don't know why, but we are, which is pretty awesome. And it's not just that the world is now benefiting from this scientific, evidence-based information that is coming online and freely available. Students are also benefiting from it.
It also allowed me to learn the topic a lot more in depth had I just been reading about it, because I actually got to see real life examples of it. Yeah, I definitely feel like I learned more. I also learned more from the other students' documentaries, because they were all real life examples of what mental disorders look like instead of just reading DSM criteria, for example.
I also think the assignment was transformative because it was different and it required us to use technologies that we hadn't normally been familiar with. It required us to interact not only with the other people in our groups, but with the other people that we were filming in our documentary. And I think that that enabled me to push my boundaries and to step outside of the box and use non-traditional ways to come up with a good final project. And I think that overall it's made me want to pursue unconventional types of classwork and unconventional types of research outside of that class and in my other courses at the university.
So as I continue on in my career and aspire to be a clinical psychologist, I think this class has inspired me to really understand what criteria looks like in real life.
I think that it's made me look at the world in a different way. I think that it has changed some of my belief systems. Some of the beliefs that I held before taking the class have been modified or just completely altered. I think that I am a better person for taking the class. I think that I can approach not only other assignments and other coursework, but approach the real world and real people with a different viewpoint that I wouldn't have had before that class.
So this is what the life of these class papers look like. You have the students learning and collaborating with each other. They're engaged in the process. What's fascinating to me is that even the ones who did terribly on these documentaries, like they knew they weren't good, but they still told me, we really enjoyed this, we got a lot out of it, even though, they didn't do very well. So the students are learning and collaborating. I'm guiding, I'm editing. I'm basically a producer for these documentaries. I'm an editor for the books. And then it turns out that everyone is learning and benefiting from doing this sort of thing. And so there's this huge difference between what I was doing 5 years ago versus what I'm doing now in these classes. So that's what I've got. I think now we're just going to sort of open it up to questions for the next however long you guys want to put up with me. I think we're going to bring the house lights back up as well. So I can actually see it.